All right. All right. It is now 10:03 in the morning. We have 13 people on the call. I think it's time to get going. My name is Mark Maydiek. I handle marketing communications for Sasko River Center. I have the pleasure to introduce my wife and the co-executive director of Sasko River Center, Melissa Kahn, and Deanna Lindberg, who will be presenting today on the effects of remote learning and OT/SPD. So I don't know who's speaking first, but the slides, I believe, are up. And Melissa, Deanna, you want to get started?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. If you guys jumped on and probably heard us chatting a little bit, that was, I have happened to have a lot of personal experience with this topic, so I feel very passionate about what we're going to be speaking about. I have 6 children, and they span from, I have 4 in high school, 1 in middle school, and 1 in elementary school. And they are all doing a combination of hybrid learning and actually complete home learning for some of them as well. So this is a topic that has demonstrated itself to me very nicely. So I will be able to share some personal experiences as well as professional knowledge based on this topic. So we're going to get started. Deanna, Deanna, why don't you introduce yourself first as well?
I'm Deanna. I'm the Occupational Therapy Program Director at Sasko River Center. I don't have any kids myself. However, I have a goddaughter and my baby cousin. So they're a little bit younger than Melissa's kids that live locally, and I've been working with them during this time of COVID, as well as been treating clients through Sasko River from the start of COVID and all the different transitions that have occurred. And it's definitely been a period of lots of transitions. So we're excited to present today.
So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to give a very brief overview of what sensory processing is. We're also going to go into some of the pros and cons of what's been occurring with virtual learning. And we are going to talk a little bit about what strategies are versus sensory breaks, just so we have an understanding. And then we're going to go through a ton of ideas and activities of how we can incorporate sensory breaks into today's environment. So with that, so I wanted to just start off briefly with picturing what sensory integration is. And this is just going to be an exaggerated example of what it could be like to learn when things are a bit awry. So I'm going to read this. You are listening to a radio that is out of tune. All you hear is static and fuzz, and the volume is way up. You're trying to see, but the lights are being turned on and off. You're sitting in a broken chair that is missing a leg at a table that is off balance. You know, the ones in restaurants that always make us so mad. Now you're wearing a feather boa in place of a comfortable t-shirt, and your pants are on backwards, and you're wearing shoes one size too small. You've been served the smelliest meal, a bowl of grated Parmesan next to a can of sardines, and then someone brings a cat litter box to the table. And now you're forced to eat your least favorite food, the one you never eat because it always causes you to gag. With all this going on, try to remember the ingredients that you need to buy at a grocery store to make dinner tonight. So this is a very exaggerated example, and we highlighted pretty much every sensory system to make a point. The point is that when things are awry or any of our systems are stressed out, it is very difficult to focus and function on something that would normally be a pretty easy everyday task. So I just thought that would be kind of an interesting visual to keep in your minds as we start talking a little bit more about sensory processing. You go to the next one.
Yep, I'm working on it.
Working on it.
Oh, no.
There you go.
Oh.
Okay, so this is a great visual that I like to use that actually shows what's occurring when we're trying to learn to work on academic learning. So if you look at this pyramid, at the very top of the pyramid, you see academic learning, which could be in school, out of school, remote, whatever it may be. You also see behaviors and activities of daily living. Behaviors meaning Are you able to meet the demands of the environment in a way that's successful for you? And activities of daily living have to do more with what is your role as a child or a parent or whatever it may be. In the case of this presentation, we're going to be talking about kids, but that means more like, can you get yourself dressed in the morning? Are you able to complete your homework on time? Are you able to have relationships with your siblings and friends and parents, meals, bathing? Like those are all roles that we take as a child. But what we don't always see is the blue and the green and the beige. So all of the things that come beneath it need to be working really, really well in order for us to have it successful at the top of the pyramid. Meaning that each of those sensory systems that we're not always aware of need to be functioning very well independently, as well as together in order to get those higher level skills. So if we take an example of just, let's say, in a typical environment of a child in school, they need to be focusing on an activity. Sorry, hold on one second. This screen is glitching on me too. Okay, so if we, Dana, can you actually point out the ones when I'm the academic learning one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for academic learning to be successful, a child needs to be displaying appropriate behavior. And what that looks like in a classroom typically is that they're attending to the teacher, they're not calling out, they're able to be less distracted by their peers, they're focusing on their lesson, and they're motivated to learn. In order to have that all available for them, they need to be able to be automatically making postural adjustments, meaning that they're not focused on keeping their body on a chair. They're able to do that automatically so that they can pay attention to what's being taught and what's going on in the environment. In order for that to happen, you have to have good body scheme. So that's on the last thing, meaning that they are able to keep their body positioned without thinking about it, with it being more of an unconscious thing. Something that the schools and possibly even home learning is doing very well is that you actually can choose your seating right now. So you can be on a couch, you could be at the chair. So you're able to make those choices, which may be helpful and may not be helpful. And we'll get a little bit more into that later. But in order to have that all working well, all of those sensory systems below need to be functioning at their best. Meaning they're not worried about how their clothing is feeling on them. They're not worried about if they can stay upright or if they need to be moving constantly. They're not distracted by sounds around them. So all of those things need to be working at their best in order for us to have the most successful ability to learn. And right now, this is what we all do automatically and instantaneously, but things have changed very, very quickly and maybe quicker than we were able to adjust for, causing a little bit more stress. And so we're seeing a little bit more difficulties in that behavior area and learning area.
Okay.
Okay. So with sensory processing, as you saw, that blue area, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the foundation, because that foundation is what we're going to be focusing on today. So we're all aware of touch, hearing, smell, taste, and sight, and we're not as familiar with the two sensory systems, your vestibular system and your proprioceptive system. So when we talk about sensory processing, we're always talking about these 7 sensory systems, but especially your vestibular and your proprioceptive system. So your vestibular system is located in your inner ear. And the reason I am mentioning where it's located is not only is it one of the most protected areas, but it's also really important when we're talking about activities later, because we're going to be talking about stimulating the sensory system. So knowing that it's located in your inner ear, which is in your head, is going to be important to remember for later. It gives us our balance and our posture, but especially our balance and our posture as it relates to coordination. It allows our body, it tells us if our body is standing still, it tells us if we're moving, and it allows the brain to provide an appropriate response due to knowing that information. Another main role of your vestibular system is your ability to maintain arousal and attention. So we think about our highest form of vestibular processing is your ability to sit still and attend. So many children who struggle with your vestibular system are the kids who are fidgeting all the time or having a really hard time maintaining that appropriate level of arousal and maintaining that attention. So I'm sure a lot of you are like, oh my gosh, the vestibular system. So just keep that one in mind for later. Your proprioceptive system is located in your muscles and your joints, and that is also going to be important to remember later. It provides you your understanding of where your body is in relationship to other body parts. For example, if you closed your eyes and you stretched out your arms and you tried to get your finger to land on your nose, you should be able to do that without putting a lot of thought into it. You're not going to be using your visual system to figure that out. You're going to automatically put your finger on your nose. If you closed your eyes, you could tell me exactly how your body was positioned, again, without needing to use your vision system or something else to figure out where it is. You should know that unconsciously. If you think about what that sensory system then relates to functionally, it would be things like keeping your body on furniture or on a chair without falling off. It would be grading. So like if you're using pencil pressure too hard, too light, if you sometimes are pushing things too hard. So sometimes you might go to give someone a high five and you overdo it, or you're bumping into your peers, or you're leaning on your friends. Those are all things that relate to that proprioceptive system.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about how sensory processing impacts school. Very similar to what Melissa went over with the pyramid of learning, but some specific examples. So one of the most powerful ways that sensory processing impacts our participation in the school, or kids' participation in the school setting, is their attention. So that vestibular system, or that movement system that Melissa just talked about, that when we move our heads, it actually activates the frontal part of our brain, which is where we process all of our learning. And that's where all the cognition comes from. So in order to be able to attend and learn really well, that vestibular system is constantly firing at an appropriate level. It's also at the same time, our sensory processing systems are kind of tuning out extraneous information. So we kind of tune out the fan running in the background, or now the air filter is running in the background. We don't hear them because our nervous system automatically turns them off. So that's one way that it supports attention. It also helps us to be able to sit still, or children to be able to sit still. Because if you're running all around or you're moving, you might not be absorbing the lesson as much. So that's also really linked to that vestibular system. Like Melissa said, you're moving in order to activate it, but it also can relate to kind of our core stability. If you have a weak core, that can make sitting still harder. But that's kind of the classic child sitting at a desk is what we think of when we think of school. But that requires a lot of sensory processing skills to be working automatically. It involves or helps us with our organizational skills. So are we able to categorize things based on color, or based on what's needed, differences visually between pens and pencils, organizing our different materials so we can get the most out of the school day. It also can relate to some higher level executive functioning skills, which is a big buzzword, but those executive functioning skills come from that frontal lobe being mature, which we talked about. It needs to be activated by the movement system in order to be able to use those skills. Then there is the visual focus and visual distractibility, the ability to kind of stay focused on what is in front of you versus if you see somebody moving in the side of your environment, you're not constantly looking up to see what that is. You're able to block that out. And then finally, when we think of occupational therapy, we often think of fine motor skills, but that takes intact sensory processing skills to know where your body is in space in order to be able to make those small motor movements required for handwriting or manipulating different classroom materials. With the change from the in-person environment, which we've all kind of taken for granted all these years, then with COVID, there was the change to a all virtual environment, and now schools are in different models of working through what's best for their setting. So some are in a hybrid model, some are in a solely virtual environment, and some are all in person. We're going to kind of focus on what the virtual learning or the hybrid model, some of the impacts, and what are some things that you can do to maximize your sensory functioning, because there's certain aspects of just going to school that we don't even realize play a role in our sensory development, as well as all of those skills that come from it, so that help us to be able to attend and organize and use our fine motor skills to their maximal ability. So with that shift to a more virtual environment, we're going to go through some of the areas that have been impacted. The first area, and this has gotten a lot of press coverage, but the idea of focusing on one point and all of the blue light that has been coming at our kids and ourselves, even from working from home and things like that. So there's been, they have those glasses to help compensate for that. But even the idea of focusing on the computer right in front of you versus you're normally moving your head and following a teacher around, that's a difference in how we're using our body. And just moving our head to kind of track the teacher, that gives us some innate movement during the day that stimulates that vestibular system. Then there's the change in the natural movement throughout the day. So children in high school would make classroom changes from class to class. Some are still doing that. Others, they're trying to limit what classes they're changing to. If we're in a strictly virtual environment, there's a lot less natural movement. Even the act of kind of getting ready for school can look a lot different and have less access. There's been some research that's coming out that is starting to support that decrease in movement can play a role on attention, similar to the research studies that have shown that multiple recess opportunities during the day can support improved attention, especially with some children with ADHD and other learning challenges. There's a difference in the natural structure of the day. School has a very routine-based structure where you get ready in the morning, go out, get on the bus, go through your classes, come home, and there's a turn on and turn off from the learning environment, and now it's kind of all blended. So that can make using all of your executive functions just a little bit more challenging because it's not innately there. The last one I'm going to highlight before Melissa talks about some other impacts are for the schools that are in person. Whenever there's a COVID exposure, a classroom will close for a period of about 2 weeks. So that kind of has resulted in this back and forth change in routine. So to develop a routine that we all probably felt at the beginning of COVID, that kind of we had to learn how to work from home. And as adults, we have more skills to be able to cope with that change. But as you kind of got comfortable with that, you might have seen it got easier, but then it was kind of a change back. And so there's this back and forth that has been going on with different COVID exposures.
So that leads really nicely into changing how we have to organize our work. And what I mean by that, and this happens differently for all of the ages, if we've learned these skills at very different times, is before we were going to school and everything was paper, or the teachers provided you the materials, or the teachers taught you how to organize it. There's like a reading center, a writing center, a math center, and now our kids are learning all remotely or hybrid, or trying to do both of these things at the same time. So even just in organizing the materials, a lot more of it is being done on the computer and needing to be organized into like Google folders or different sorts of online folders. And that's a skill that takes time to learn. I mean, I know every time we change a system or anything within a computer system, it takes time to relearn that system. And our kids are doing an amazing job of this, but they need to learn that very quickly. And sometimes there's a preference involved with this. Like I know some people really prefer to still hold a book or hold a newspaper versus read something on a Kindle. But right now they do not have that choice. And the majority of things are all online, and they need to learn how to organize materials. And especially for younger kids who are very tactilely or need to do things by experiencing it, they no longer have that other additional sensation of being able to move and organize their materials. They now have to mentally do it and figure out how to do that on a computer, which is a very different skill. A lot more auditory learning. So, I mean, I know for me, even presenting to a screen without like seeing an audience is so different, or hearing a presentation always just coming at you from an auditory. You don't have that additional sensory system of the visual system. For some kids, that's a real positive. We've actually seen some children do better with just learning things more auditorily and not having all the visual distractions going on around them. And some kids really need that additional vision or tactile system to help them process the auditory better. So this could be a strength or a weakness, but it is definitely something to recognize as different. Earlier shift to independence and accountability. This is a huge one that I've seen with all of the kids in all ages. They are now responsible for printing up their materials and ahead of time if they're going to be writing something for an assignment, and then they actually need to hand it in on their own, meaning that they need to take a picture of it, upload it, submit it. Those are a lot of executive functioning skills again, and at very young ages. They also need to make sure that they are more independent learners. So you don't necessarily have a teacher helping to keep you on task. You're responsible for keeping yourself on task. You're also responsible for utilizing your time properly. So this again can be really difficult, but it's also something that we can acknowledge and celebrate that our kids are doing well. So although we might see struggles here, it's incredible the independence that they've had. I've seen my own children get up, get themselves ready, print up their materials. It's a big change, and it's something that's fantastic. This is also the motivation to learn, and being peer and teacher driven is a very big thing. Usually when we're in a classroom, you have everybody working around you, and it's kind of, you're all doing the same thing, where at home, you really need to be more driven and motivated on your own. And sometimes, like most of us, we're working and our kids are kind of trying to figure it out on their own and get through their day, and there's not as much peer and teacher help. And then utilizing breaks appropriately. I know this is a very big one for the high schoolers, because a lot of them are resorting to chatting and their screen time versus taking a break, moving around, eating, feeding themselves, and just being able to kind of give themselves an actual break from screens and get some movement back into their day, or even again use their like study halls to get their work done versus just kind of get distracted and kind of chat and socialize, which is also positive, but it depends on what they need to be doing in the moment and what's appropriate for that time. And sorry, supporting help, the same thing is also, if you do need to reach out to a teacher, again, they need to kind of be able to do that on their own. You've got someone sitting right there for them to ask. So you need to learn how to either email a teacher, remember your appointment and show up for it, or just, younger kids, even sending an email to their teacher asking for help is also a really big deal and something that's very different. These are all great skills. They're just all new skills. So before we get into some of the sensory strategies and breaks, I wanted to just run us through this example of basically showing why we're going to be doing these sensory strategies and sensory breaks and where we're going to be implementing them. So I want us to pretend that we are this yellow line on this chart, and I'd like you to follow along. I'm just going to run us through a story. So I'd like you to pretend that you woke up and that you're getting up in the morning and you need to get your kids out for school, and you forgot to set the alarm, so you've now overslept. So you can see that your yellow line is starting to go up. You then get your kids up and you forget that it was actually a in-school day and not a stay-at-home day. So you're more stressed because now you run out of time and your child's going to be late for school. You get into the car and you go to drive them to school and you run out of gas. And you realize that now you're really in trouble. They're not going to make it to school. You got to get to the gas station, and you also have a meeting at your own work office that you have to be on time for. So you're getting more stressed. The meeting goes okay, and you're on your way home, and you, I'm trying to think what else happens. You get a flat tire. You have lots of car problems today. So you get another flat tire, and your arousal again is going up. And then you get home, and your partner asks you if you remember to pick up their dry cleaning, and you explode and you yell at them, and it seems like something very trivial that you shouldn't have actually gotten mad about, but you could have just taken a deep breath and be like, no, hon, had a bad day, forgot, sorry. but instead you yell at them. This is what it's like sometimes for our kids. So right now they've got a lot of new stresses on them, and it might seem like something small that's setting them up, but really they're dealing with so much change and difference on a day-to-day basis. And our sensory systems need to be really flexible and elastic to be able to handle these changes. So the goal in what we're going to be talking about for either strategies and breaks has a lot to do with maintaining a better level of arousal. So clearly I got too mad at my partner for asking me a simple question that I shouldn't have gotten upset with. But if I had my own ability to take a deep breath and calm down, then I could have responded more appropriately. So what we're going to be doing is some of our kids haven't yet developed their own ability to calm themselves down and to regulate. So some of these skills that we're going to be talking about are an external way of helping them learn strategies and ways of calming themselves back down, or maintaining that appropriate level of arousal. We all do it without realizing it. Like we all have our own strategies. Like my partner just got me a cup of coffee, and if I could work out in the morning, I'm in a better place. But we all have little strategies that we use to keep our arousals in better places. So, Deanna, you're on the next slide.
So when our children might be feeling that stress or that yellow zone of arousal that Melissa just talked about, it can come out in multiple different ways. So see, these are some behaviors or observable things that you can watch for, which just means that they're working a little bit harder. It doesn't necessarily mean a red flag, but when we talk about maybe we want to compensate with some strategies, or we want to help them to regulate with some sensory breaks, these are some of the things you're looking out for. So one is fidgeting. So whether it's moving around in your chair or it's kind of playing with your pencil, fidgeting helps provide proprioceptive and vestibular input, so movement and body-based input, which helps us to focus a little bit more. It can also mean that we're working a little bit harder, so we're trying to regulate. So that's one indicator. Fatiguing quickly or seeing your child is just more tired can mean that just because they didn't do as much physical activity, they can be using a lot of mental or cognitive capabilities. So maybe organizing is much harder for them on the screens or in their home environment than in the school environment. So they can be using more of those skills that are harder for them, which can contribute to some fatigue. Zoning out is another one that we see. So that's it's our body's innate way to try to give us a little bit of a break. It's not the most productive break, but the zoning out and kind of staring into space can be a symptom that they're not getting enough vestibular input to be activated. Frustration is another big one. So whether you see, your child might have been very resilient before this time, and it seems to be getting frustrated more, the skills that Melissa kind of just spoke about that are being impacted, or now that are new skills for them, can just be a lot, and you might see more of those explosive behaviors or kind of a change in self-confidence. They could get frustrated that they missed a meeting or missed a class when the teacher then emails that they weren't present. You can see some of that. One other thing that we're seeing is the statement, "I'm bored," a lot. And I think this is partially a generational trend. So, and it's something that we call praxis or motor planning, but we have to be able to think of the idea to even engage in motor plan. So that's not a natural skill, it's something that's developed. And because a lot of things are very structured at a young age, a lot of children haven't developed that skill well. So now that they have large chunks of time that they need to fill, that skill, sometimes you have to kind of give them more structured ideas in order for them to engage in something. That ability to just think of something on their own, it can be more challenging.
Okay, so I mentioned this a little bit briefly earlier, but I just wanted to differentiate between what a sensory strategy is and what a sensory break is. A sensory strategy is really a quick fix. It's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a problem. Well, it might not just be a problem, but it helps us maintain a level of arousal. So we all do sensory strategies all the time. That's what I was kind of alluding to earlier. Like I know some people like to click their pens or whatever they need to do in the moment to stay alert and to stay focused. And strategies are not bad. And it's just to help a child with a skill in a particular moment. A sensory break is actually working on your nervous system. So it's actually making a change in the nervous system. And we're going to talk specifically about sensory breaks and what's going on in the brain for those. And it helps lower our arousal. Meaning if we were that yellow line again, when you perform a sensory break, you're bringing your arousal back down and keeping it there. And it might then go back up again, but then you'll do another sensory break to kind of keep that arousal in a better place. Strategies, you're staying at the same level, but you're not necessarily lowering or making a change to the nervous system. You're kind of using a quick fix to get through the moment. So we're going to go through a few strategies, and then we'll go through some sensory breaks. So seating for when you're at home has been a great option. I know that in my own household, we've got at least 4 or 5 different seats going on at this point. You can use a ball to sit on or a movable chair. Some kids like those ergonomic chairs. There's chairs with different feet that move. There's wobble cushions that you can put on your seat. You can use the couch if you want to for reading. So there's all different options to help kids focus, and they can also change their seating throughout the day as well. Fidgets, like Deanna had mentioned, but again, it's really looking at what your child prefers, whether they want something that they can squeeze and hold in their hand or something that they can constantly be moving and change. Deanna's holding one in her hand now. It's actually a funny story. We have one of my youngest one got specs, those little magnet balls, and wherever he leaves it, somebody winds up picking it up. Like it just goes around the household. He's like, hey, that's mine. And he's like, you didn't ask me. And we all say, like, we had no idea we even picked it up. Like it just winds up in somebody's hand. We're always all fidgeting so much. So just making those available, and I'll get into it later, but if you have a designated place for doing your work, it's really nice to have like all the tools that you need readily available. So I know we keep like therapy balls in the rooms that they're all working in, and we have fidgets on all of their desks, and we have water bottles that they can drink from. So just having all of the options there for them to start developing those tools, although you're imposing it upon them, they're going to start to learn what works best for them and do the same thing. Lighting, again, everyone has a different preference. Natural lighting is a lot better for your nervous system. If you're doing a lot of screens, we've been doing a lot of the blue light glasses. You can order them on Amazon. They're great. They really do help prevent some eye fatigue and headaches. I also recommend like putting an actual light for when it's getting darker earlier over their desks so that they have better lighting to be able to see their work. Desk organization has been great. If you can get like a standing file folder for them and have actual organized folders labeled for different subjects or different needs that they may have, and then all of the tools that they need for the day. So pencils, pens, chargers for the computers, the fidgets, you can have like a fidget bin on their desk, anything that you can do to make it easier for them and have them be able to be organized. So I know it's difficult, like their stuff winds up all over the house, but at least they can put it away at the end of the day or know where it is so that they're much easier for them to be ready. Location designated for school, there's tons of studies on this. It's much better to have an area that you're actually working in and separating it out from bedrooms especially. So bedrooms are meant for sleeping and for being able to fall asleep easily. And if you're doing schoolwork and say it could or could not be stressful for somebody, that stress kind of translates into the bed or the bedroom. And that no longer becomes an area for relaxation and falling asleep easily, but becomes an area where they also associate it with stress. So it's really nice to keep those areas separate. And you can even use their room as like an area to take a break. Like, oh, you finished your schoolwork, go take a break, relax, listen to some music, whatever works well for them. But having like a set place that they can call their own and know they're kind of going to school is really helpful. We talked about the water bottle. We talked about organizational folders. And then prepared materials. This is something that we've been trying to get into the habit of in our own house as well, is printing up stuff that they're going to need, or at least looking through on a Sunday night or the night before school, what are they going to need for the next day, and having it all ready to go, so that when, say, they're having a hard time getting onto a Zoom class, at least they have everything else together. And so it's less stress. The more that we can teach them these skills, which actually translate for the rest of their life, the better it'll be. So those are just a few strategies. So now we get to do more of the fun stuff. The sensory breaks are, it's really important more about the sequence of how we perform a sensory break than the length of the time of the sensory break. So we've identified kind of different sensory challenges and different behaviors to watch for. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about doing the sensory breaks and when a good time is to do them. I know Deanna and I both feel strongly about this. It's better to do little bits throughout the day so that you're constantly keeping that arousal in a good place than to just wait throughout the whole entire day and then do it for like an hour. So like literally 2 to 3 minutes throughout the day goes a really long way. So the combination that we like to talk about is vestibular input followed by proprioceptive input. The vestibular input we talked about before was the sensory systems located in your inner ear. So that vestibular system, when we're moving it around, wakes up our brain and alerts it. A lot of times when kids are fidgety or moving around, everyone wants to tell them to sit down and calm down, but you actually want to do the exact opposite. You want to give them more movement and get their head moving through space, and then because it releases histamine, and then you want to follow it up with the heavy work or the proprioceptive input, because then it releases another neurotransmitter called serotonin, which is really calming and relaxing. If you think about a massage, the reason why everybody loves a massage or loves like a deep hug is because it's releasing serotonin throughout your body and it calms you down, and you can't help but like take a deep breath and calm down. So this is going to give you the best bang for your buck. You're going to do a movement activity and you're going to follow it with a heavy work activity. So that sequence is really, really key. And I'm actually going to run you through something that has a little bit more than just movement and heavy work, and you can change this activity, but I'm going to have us all, we've been sitting for a while, have us all stand up and we're going to try an actual sensory activity that is going to stimulate these different sensory systems. So this one is kind of geared towards younger children. You probably can't see me, but okay. Deanna, you'll have to help me out. They can see you.
Okay.
Look at Deanna, because my computer's gonna fall. I think I made a mistake here. Okay. So something that we didn't talk about is when we're doing movement, because we're using our head, if you can add a visual component to it, it is really, really helpful, because the vision and the vestibular system are linked together. So if you can help link them, it makes it even more powerful. So that's why this first part is called picking an apple, because I want you to use your vision to pick the apple and use your vision to put it in a basket. So you're going to reach up really, really high, and you're going to grab an apple from the tree, and you're going to put it in the basket down low. And then you're going to reach up and you're going to get another apple from the tree, and you're going to put it in the basket down low. And we're just going to get another 2. We're going to shorten this one. We're going to reach up, we're going to put it in the basket. If you were doing this at home, you could do this 10 times. And you're going to put it in the basket again. And now, if you remember what we talked about, we're going to do the proprioceptive piece. So we're going to squish those apples. So we're going to stomp them. We're going to squish, squish, squish. Oh, make sure you get all of them, because we have to make applesauce, and it's so much easier if we just get them smushed. And then we're going to squeeze out the juice. This actually is more proprioception. So we're going to squeeze it all the way out of our arms. So really get all the juice out of these apples. We don't want any left at all. And you're going to get them out of your legs. So you're going to keep squeezing them, keep getting them all out. Oh, you guys are doing such a great job. And now you are going to cool it down, because we made our awesome applesauce. So I want you to take your fingers in front of you. Again, we're trying to get that deep breath for calming and using our vision. So you're going to take a deep breath in, and you're going to blow it To cool it off, you're going to blow down your fingers one at a time. And do one more. Great job. So that's like a quick little sequence. You would actually make it a little bit longer, and those the instructions for how long you would do it is actually on this slide. I just wanted to shorten it to make sure we got through all the activities today. But it's, again, it was more about moving, following up with heavy work, and then I added respiration into this one, which you can or cannot do at home, but the most important part is the movement followed by the heavy work. So I'm going to let Deanna go on to the next one.
So we're just recapping that the key piece here is the movement and heavy work, like Melissa said. Now I'm going to go through and give a bunch of different activities that will, or I call them quick grab activities. So you can take them and use them in your everyday life, but you also don't necessarily need to pick something that I made up or that we have. You can use your knowledge of what is head movement and what is proprioceptive or heavy work. Kind of reminds me of that commercial that the mom or dad sends the child up and down the stairs looking for their wallet to find to get money to go out. So it doesn't have to be something that's a game or an activity that we're giving you. It's just how are we thinking about the activity. So for teenagers, doing chores like putting the dishes away, bending down to get something from the dishwasher and putting it up on the high shelves, that's vestibular. And then maybe doing the pots is a little bit more proprioceptive. So it can be as integrated into your life or as standalone as you feel is appropriate for your family and that your child might want to engage in. You can also think about it of how can I give myself some movement breaks, because the more regulated that we are, the better that we're going to be able to respond to our children who have a little bit more difficulty controlling their emotions. And this has definitely been a stressful time for everyone, and we talk about our children, but it's also a stressful time for ourselves and making all those adjustments. And not only are you put in the role of a worker or a mom, now you're also a teacher and you're also a member of society that's just not operating the way it normally is. So taking care of yourself is really important during this time as well. So I'm going to give a couple examples of vestibular activities and then a couple easy examples of proprioceptive activities that you can use to pull from. Like I said, this is not an all-encompassing list. It's just for you to start thinking about what things stimulate the vestibular system and what things use the proprioceptive system. One comparison I always say is sometimes people, when we say movement, which tends to mean vestibular, will say, am I stimulating my vestibular system if I'm shaking my leg or if I'm stretching? I'm moving my arms here, but I'm not moving my head, so it's not vestibular. So for vestibular activities, one example is cobra and downward dog yoga poses. So that really causes head inversion down and then up. Another easy one is side-to-side neck stretches. So even you can do those during your Zoom calls to activate your vestibular system a little bit, back and forth and some repetition. Jump and spins. Some of the younger kids like this to try to see how far around they can stand up and jump and spin, and then try to go the other way. One key thing is when you're spinning, you always want to make sure they go both ways. Children tend to have a preference for one way, and we want to make sure that they get both ways. The next one I put down is burpees. This one can be a good one for teenagers or if your child's more athletic based, because you're jumping all the way up and then you're going all the way down into more of a plank position. Side to side stretches also get that head moving side to side, or kind of twisting yourself in your chair. Again, we want a little bit of repetition and moving their head. We also have some examples on the Sasco River Center YouTube page. So one that is a fun one is Let's Play Word Run that you can look up after this presentation. That's a game-based vestibular activity. For proprioceptive activities, we have an easy one, if you were just kind of sitting, would be to put both hands on your head and pull down, or kind of just stretches. One that's fun, especially for the younger kids or the older kids if they can stay in control, is a push four. So a push four is you'll have the child push against your hands and push you over or push you back towards the wall. It can be kind of a game. Hanging is a way that we really don't normally think of proprioceptive input, but it's really sometimes a key one for children, which is those kids that gravitate towards the monkey bars or feel like they're hanging on you all the time. Pull-up bars are in, you can put a pull-up bar in a doorway of your house and do different games with the hanging on the pull-up bar. Progressive muscle relaxation, that's all proprioceptive. So there's some great apps that walk a child through that. Sometimes I do something as simple as we're squeezing the lemons with our hands and we're releasing it. And now you're going to pretend you got lemon in your eye. So you're going to squeeze your eyes and then open them and squeeze your eyes. So that's that progressive muscle relaxation in that way. Cross-arm push-ups are more achievable for some younger children. So it's basically you're in the push-up position and you're crossing your arm with each one instead of doing bending your arms for push-ups. So now that you have that concept of vestibular and proprioceptive, we're trying to think of how can I use this every day? Or how can I get my kids to engage in these activities? So we've come up with different options that, based on your child's maturity level and what they're motivated by, to help build their buy-in. So it's not just something else that you're asking them to do. Or if you're an educator, you can try to incorporate some of these into your breaks during the classroom. But one area that that works really well for some older children, so we kind of said around the age of 8 and above, even preteen and teenagers, is kind of having a family meeting and teaching them a little bit about what you learned today, but in their terms. The vestibular system and the proprioceptive system aren't really taught in schools, primarily because they're internal systems, so it's harder to teach. It's not like you can do experiments where you learn smell and sight and colors. They're internal, so they're not natural to teach. But also children think it's really cool if they learn something nobody else knows. So kind of educating them on how they can use their own sensory systems and that they might learn about senses that other people don't know about can be really motivating and engaging for them. You can talk about how you use sensory breaks or different activities that you use to help you feel good, and then working with your children to kind of find what sequence works for them or what are some of their favorite activities. In the new year, we're going to be offering an online workshop to kind of help children create their own movement breaks. This can be great for in our virtual environment, but even just for study skills to kind of break up homework moving forward. We have a video on the website as well called the Morning Sensory Wake Up that you can look as an example. And if you made your own video, sometimes kids like to make their own videos now, and you want to tag us in it, you can see different videos of these sequences that kids are engaging in. This is another way. This is more of a game or an activity based if that's what your child's into. This again is on our website. It's a roll the dice game. So each category of you're going to roll the dice 5 times. And on roll 1, you're going to follow the instructions. So if I rolled a 1 on my first roll, I would stomp my feet 10 times. If I rolled a 3 on my second roll, I would build an obstacle course and complete it 3 times. If I rolled a 2 on my third roll, I would do 5 donkey kicks, 4 on my fourth roll, wheelbarrow walk, and a 1 on my last roll, then it would be blowing up a balloon. The way this is made is it takes you through what tends to be more vestibular first in the first 2 rolls, proprioceptive in the third and fourth roll, and respiration in the final roll. It also changes it up every time, so it's a little bit of luck, like what am I going to get? for some older children, you can have them make their own roll the dice, filling it in, so that way they can kind of pick some of their favorite activities that might be options.
You can change it up too, is that you can get like the jumbo foam dice. That's really fun, so they can like throw them, which is really cool. Or they can even do origami and make their own dice. So there's lots of different fun ways of doing this.
For younger kids, there is a website called Wheel of Names, and it's basically just a spinner website that you can put all the different vestibular activities on one wheel, and then on another wheel you can do proprioceptive, and it just kind of is a spinner. You can make your own spinner as well if you wanted to and make it a craft, but it kind of takes, sometimes taking the control out of them, like do one of these and then one of these, that luck can be motivating. Similarly, this is actually what a lot of clients of mine use, and sometimes we even do during some sessions, to make an activity of making either laminated cards or thumb depressors or tongue depressors that have the name of vestibular activities and then proprioceptive activities. So they pick one from one jar and one from the other, and that's their movement break for that period of time. The next thing, that activity can be a movement break. It also can be a way to engage. This one I like not only just as a movement break, but also a family activity, and it can even be done over Zoom for like Zoom play dates, because it involves multiple people. So this game is called Movement Add-on. It's very similar to the game that it's like, I'm going to a picnic and I'm bringing an apple. And then the next person has to say, I'm going to a picnic, I'm bringing an apple and a banana. But instead, you're picking movements. As the adult, you're going to try to think of some vestibular activities and proprioceptive activities to be your movement, but the child also gets a choice too. Melissa and I are going to do a quick example if you want to watch, just to show how the sequence would go. So if I was the first person and this was my movement, I might pick a movement that's spinning side to side in my chair. And then Melissa would have to replicate it and then add something. And then I would do the whole sequence again. And then this one's a good one. Like I said, Zoom play dates, they kind of see how many they can get up to, what's their record, or could even, if you're an educator, be used as part of a classroom break activity that engages people, or your kids. So it could be. I want to note that sometimes, while all these activities can seem fun to us, sometimes our children might have a different response than we're expecting. So sometimes they might get frustrated during the activity, or maybe they'll get more wound up, or they'll kind of be avoidance of it. Sometimes if the challenge is too hard, so let's say working memory is really hard for them, for a movement add-on game, that might not be the best choice for them, but the best choice at the end of the day when they're tired. It might be a better beginning of the day activity. So if something doesn't feel like it's regulating for them, another example could be the burpees. So if you were doing burpees, while that might be a great choice for a 14-year-old athletic boy, a child that has more difficulty with strength or motor planning might be frustrated by it. So it's kind of looking at your child and being a detective of what's working and what's not. So it's not necessarily that it's not working because it's proprioceptive and it's supposed to help me or help them. It's probably not working because it has a challenge that is triggering or arousing for them. The last game that I'm going to talk about is Jump to the Beat. This one you can take Post-its and put arrows on them on the floor, and then put arrows like on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper in front of them. And they have to jump kind of like DDR, but with 2 feet. So jumping on the arrows, but then you can add a metronome beat. So YouTube has metronomes for every beat per minute. I normally start with around 40 to 50 beats per minute and have the child try to jump to the beat. And as they master it, they can try to make it a little bit faster. Multiple kids can play this game as well, and you can do it over a Zoom play date by they make the charts for each other so they can try to stump each other. So that's all of our activities that we have. However, we do want to think about what tools we can use, similar to the strategies that Melissa was talking about before. But what's in your sensory toolbox? Some of the ones that we recommend are a yoga ball, a Bosu bump. Those are great ways to get vestibular input. Weighted ball or some fidgets are great ways to get proprioceptive input. Painter's tape can help you put things on the ground to jump over or kind of make home obstacle courses. Sasko River Center does have a sensory crate with different activity cards that you could inquire with us and purchase as well. But sometimes just having the right tools at home can make a big difference. I kind of touched on this before, but when we're thinking about how to best support our children, make sure that we're best supporting ourselves first. And I think it's been said so many times, but I still think it's important that we reiterate it in probably every one of these sessions, is to make sure you put your own oxygen mask first. And you can use some of the activities that we talked about, or the premises around regulation and vestibular and proprioceptive input, in order to regulate you. So when you're more regulated, you can help your child to be regulated and co-regulate. It's definitely, there's so much research coming out about COVID fatigue. It's a year that it just keeps on going. And every time we feel like we've adjusted to something, something new comes out. So really making sure that you not only think about this presentation and these strategies for your child, but also for yourself, and to help you feel the best that you can be. So we wanted to thank you for joining us. And there's a reference page at the end as well, that if there's anyone is interested in where we got some of our information and kind of more reading. At this time, we'll open up the chat if anyone has any questions.
While we wait for, I don't want to call anybody out actually, but there is one person who's on the call who's been very engaged, and we just want to say that we appreciate your involvement. The one person with their video camera on and has been following along. So thank you very much. I know that it helps the presenters a lot. Deanna, they're asking for the reference list on the screen.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to add, before I send out the PDF, I'll also add some of the links that you reference in the set, or the YouTube channel, and I think the wheel thing you mentioned. So there we go. It's up there. So yeah, feel free to unmute yourselves or put yourself in the chat box if you have any questions for Melissa or Deanna, or for me, actually. That's fine too. I'm going to mute myself again.
And just to reiterate what Deanna said too, I feel like it is a really great lesson to acknowledge that we are also struggling as parents, and just there's been a lot of change. So I do know that I sometimes need to tell my kids, hey, this is hard. So I can expect, I understand that it's hard for them, but it's also hard for us trying to get used to it all. So we're all human, and everyone's doing a great job, and it's been extremely resilient and flexible. And I'm sure that we could all use these skills, but we're all trying to put our best selves forward.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So my daughter is definitely very sensory, and I'm really grateful. Thank you so much for all these suggestions. This will be terrific. What do we do in an instance there? My daughter, I have twin girls. They're actually attending school 5 days a week in person, so we're very lucky that we still have that structure. She gets home, she's very tired. I think, the working memory, the effort required to focus during the day takes a lot out of her. We're finding it very difficult to get her to do her homework in the afternoon or evening. And I'm struggling with, obviously want to balance that she's tired, but there's also the need to do the homework. And what ends up happening a lot of the time is she doesn't want to do her math, and then we're trying to do it first thing in the morning when she is fresher, but we're also trying to get ready for school. So it's not a great combination. Do you have any suggestions for how we might sort of refresh her, I guess, to be able to do homework in the afternoon or evening?
Yeah, Cian, do you want me to?
If you want to take it, I can.
Oh, you can add in, but I'll I guess what we were talking about before, the sensory break. I think taking a break before starting homework, like a really long one, actually, like, you know, allowing, I'm not sure if you're doing screens or if you're going straight into homework, but taking a walk, doing one of those actually sensory breaks that we described, and then getting into the homework. And then I would also add in fun things to the homework for math. So you could use graph paper, you could use really cool pencils and pens. You could, you know, make it like a kind of a fun activity in that way. And I think that would really make a big difference.
I agree. Sometimes what I like to recommend to some of my, I think this is very common and probably one of the most common questions that I get is having an allotted time if you have it. And I think one of the great things about this year is our children aren't necessarily overscheduled because there's not as many extracurriculars. But setting a time that is their time after school for 20 minutes, that's kind of sensory, or I kind of call it like sensory free, or it's not overstimulating. So it's not necessarily screens, but it could be Legos or something preferred that in a small, like cozy corner to kind of let the brain recuperate, and then kind of engaging in that sensory break because they just work so hard. So it almost, they need a little break from everything to then be able to reactivate themselves. And whenever you see tired, I always try to really think vestibular. So sometimes kind of getting them a little bit of vestibular input to get to the homework, as well as cutting it into chunks. So if they can do 3 questions really well, then they can get another break. And you can kind of up the ante as they improve, or putting a visual timer on, but it helps them to have some say and feel something, even if they didn't accomplish it all, and celebrating that.
No, that sounds fantastic. And we do incorporate some of that. Chloe actually comes home and she puts on roller skates, and we have a carpeted basement, and she's back and forth. And that is very organizing for her. She does it first thing in the morning. She listens to music as well before she goes to school. So she's sort of getting herself going for the day. So she uses it to rev up and also to, you know, unwind. But I definitely appreciate, you know, the other ideas, and especially, you know, using some more vestibular movement to help manage the tiredness. That'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for, did you have another question, Kate?
Sorry, I did have one other question. With your alertness chart, we talked about the, you know, the yellow line, but I'm also thinking about the blue line at the bottom if the child is not sufficiently stimulated. And would you be using sort of the same techniques, the same proprioceptive and vestibular, to get to an appropriate level of arousal if it's, you know, if it's not that you want to come down, it's that you're needing to go up?
Yes, actually, and it's great that you were able to recognize that and get that from the conversations we were having. When you have a kid that's kind of on the lower end of things, you want to, again, focus so much on that vestibular piece, but probably more intensely and for longer periods of time. So more intensely would be more unpredictable movement, longer amounts of that unpredictable movement. So not just like linear, but like more bouncing, changing of direction, rolling. So a lot more of it, and for longer periods of time to get them into that place.
Great, that sounds fantastic. Thank you so much.
And if it's someone who's also fatigued, I know we were talking a lot about adding vision with it and following it up with proprioception. I would probably give them just straight movement, like for, you know, a good 10-15 minutes before adding in anything else with it. to see that arousal kind of come up.
Great. That sounds terrific. Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Well, thank you, everybody. And if you have any other questions, you can always reach out to us. Mark will be sending out the presentation, and I'm sure he'll include, do you include our emails as well with that, Mark? You're muted.
I think he said sure. I can read lips.
Yes, I can. Certainly, I'll include a PDF of the deck, a link to the recording of the video, your emails, and then perhaps a couple links in the presentation email or the summary email I send as well.
All right. Well, happy early holidays, everybody. See you
All right.
soon. Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thank you both, Melissa, Deanna, for presenting. Thank you to our audience for participating, and look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right.